Hello and welcome to Mindful Music. This is the fourth session from the City of London Sinfonia. I'm Ann Lovatt. I'm a violinist with the orchestra and I'm delighted to be here with you tonight. Thank you for joining me. We're going to be looking at diaphragmatic breathing tonight. And so this is really just a practice of deep breathing and controlled breathing. It's really, really helpful in lots of situations. It helps with the fight or flight adrenal response. So if you're very tense, it's a really good method of controlling that. And all you'll need for this session is a mat like this one, exercise or yoga mat. You'll need a block for your head or maybe some books. It's really important to have your head supported. We'll be lying flat on the floor with our knees raised, and again you might want a pillow or a cushion under your knees if you're more comfortable like that. If you're worried about getting up and down to the floor, please don't do that. You can do this exercise, the breathing exercise, on a bed or a sofa, and even sitting if that's better. Okay, so what we'll do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about anatomy and physiology of breathing, and then we'll do some work on the floor with our breath, and I'll teach you how to do the first stages of diaphragmatic breathing, which is something you can go on and develop yourself. After that, I'll be going into another room in the house to play you some beautiful music. I'm going to be playing a movement from Bach's Goldberg Variations No.25, which is a really gorgeous, very chromatic, very fluid bit of writing. And during that music, I hope you'll deepen your breathing practice. So I'm hoping everybody's gathered and you've had a minute to find what you need, something to be comfortable, just a rug maybe on the floor, and definitely something to raise your head. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our lungs. Now, we don't really think probably that we breathe about 20,000 times a day, and the lungs, which are on this, I'm going to show you a picture. I want you to have a really good look at that. The lungs, so important and helpful that we understand how they work and where they are in the body. And they come quite a bit higher than you might expect. And people, when I show them this picture, they always say, oh, the lungs are so high up the body, I never thought. Because we think of it all being down here. So just a tiny bit of anatomy for the lungs. Your right lung is slightly bigger, it has 3 lobes. The left lung has 2 lobes because there's a space there for the heart. And it all sits in the thoracic or chest cavity. What you can't see on this diagram is the windpipe. You obviously just see the spine there, but there is a windpipe, of course, the trachea, which comes down, and around about here it connects into the lung tissue through tubes called the bronchi. It's like an upside down Y shape, and I'm sure you'll have seen the inside of lungs on pictures where it's like looking at an upside down tree, and the bronchi separate out into branches, a bit like a tree, called the bronchioles, and they go right out to tiny leaves on the end called the alveoli, and they are little oxygen sacs. So the lungs are an incredibly efficient way of gathering oxygen. If you flattened out the lung tissue, you would have something the size of a tennis court. So this is a very sophisticated part of the body. So I'm going to show you next a picture of the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a thin sheet of muscle that really separates the torso, for the chest part, the thoracic part of the torso, from the abdominal part of the torso, and it supports the lungs. It's a flat sheet of muscle which descends, contracts when we breathe in, and relaxes back up again when we breathe out, and the very motion of it contracting downwards sucks air into the lungs. And so here it is. You don't need to see the bits of writing on this picture, just have a look at the skeleton. You can see that the diaphragm attaches to the base of the sternum, that bony bit down the front of the chest. And it also attaches all around the base of the ribs, and goes right round to the back and attaches to the spine. So it's a very, very large muscle, the most important muscle of respiration, and sometimes a bit misunderstood, I think. I'm just going to show you a picture now of the diaphragm. Oh, before I do, another diaphragm, I forgot. Down here in the pelvis, there's another diaphragm called the pelvic floor, the pelvic diaphragm, and that also moves when we breathe. So it's just important to know that everything moves when we breathe, right throughout the whole body, and particularly the whole torso. And so this diaphragm down at the bottom will move in tandem with the diaphragm under the lungs. So here it is from below. I just think it's a really fascinating view to see up like that. You see in the middle, the white area, that's just a tendinous area, because it's quite a fibrous muscle. But that's the only tendon that's not attached to bone in the body. And you can see a couple of holes in it, and it has three major holes, one for the vena cava, one for the aorta, and another for the esophagus. And those of you who always wonder about hiccups, when the diaphragm is irritated, because there is a sphincter that encloses the entry through the diaphragm into the stomach, when the diaphragm is irritated, that's when you get hiccups. So there you have it. And having done that, in a moment, we're going to go to the floor and we're going to have a bit of a feel of the body and really enhance our understanding of how all of that actually works in practice. So this is a mindful music session, and so far it's not been much to do with music, has it? But the piece I'm going to play later, I just wanted to talk to you for a few moments, because it has the most perfect breathing shape. Now, you might say that all music breathes, and as a musician it's really important to know how and when to breathe, and to actually give the music space. Sometimes when you hear maybe inexperienced performers perform, or someone who's very anxious, the thing that goes wrong is that they forget to breathe, they forget to leave space, and it's incredibly important in music as in so many other ways. So, it might seem obvious, but there's very much, to my mind, an inhale and an exhale in the music, and I'll just take that apart. So this is the first inhale. And then an exhale. Another inhale. Out. And in. And out. And that's taking it to bits, obviously, but it's important to know when you play a piece of music how it's shaped and how it breathes, and then the job as a musician is to make it really flow into one long phrase. So I'll try and do that. So I hope you get the feeling of that expansiveness within the breath. There's an expansive nature to the breathing, and I suppose that's what we'll be doing today. We'll be working on techniques that you'll be able to expand yourself. So I'll just put this back down. So you might want to get down to your mat now. Oh, it's so nice to lie down. Just allow gravity to do its thing for a moment. Have your feet hip width apart and flat on the floor. Just get your head really comfortable. Put your head So you're looking up at the ceiling. I'm going to be looking at the camera so you can really hear me clearly. So relax your head. Just do a little top and toe, the whole body for a moment, from head to neck and shoulders. Feel your back flattening into the floor and your pelvis. Try and have your knees nicely balanced and feet. Really just wiggle those toes. Find a nice comfortable position. And before we start our breathing proper, I'd like to do just a tiny mindfulness exercise with you, which is to do with listening. So for a few moments, we're just going to listen to the room. So whichever room you're in, you might hear sounds outside, inside. Just listen, really, really listen. Don't allow any thoughts, if you can, to intrude. If they do, just take your mind mindfully back to your listening. And now I want you to try to listen to your breathing. And now, as well as listening to your breathing, just focus on how you're breathing and try to breathe really normally. And just notice the evenness of your breath and really connect with your breath. Now I'd like you to place your hands on your ribs, on your sides. And again, connecting with that breath, notice how the body moves as you breathe. Now placing one hand on your abdomen and one on your chest. Again, pay attention to the sensations of the body as you breathe. And the reason we're lying down, and you'll notice this in this position, is that the chest and the shoulders, the upper body is inhibited to some degree because we're lying on the floor, and that's a really good way to start to practice diaphragmatic breathing, because you'll feel your abdomen rise and fall, probably slightly more than you would if you were in a seated position. So now take your hands to your ribs. Really important muscles in between, over and underneath the ribs, the intercostal muscles. Very important in respiration. And you'll feel your whole rib cage expand on the in-breath and relaxing downwards and inwards on the out-breath. Just take a couple of breaths, feeling that movement. Now we're going to tuck our fingertips actually under the ribs. So just do this very gently and keep on breathing, and you should feel the diaphragm there. On the in-breath, you'll feel it descending as it contracts. And as it relaxes, the breath leaves the body. And underneath the diaphragm, you have the liver, one of the largest abdominal organs, your stomach slightly to the left, and the intestines, and everything is pushed very gently out of the way. The diaphragm moves about 2 centimeters when we're just doing quiet breathing. But when you're exercising and the abdominal muscles really kick in, it can move up to 10 centimeters. So it's a very flexible, very powerful muscle. So now move your hands down to the abdomen. Put your elbows on the floor so that your arms are relaxed. Relax your hands. We're going to start breathing in through our noses and out through our mouths. So we're going to have a lovely circle of breath. So in through the nose and out through the mouth. And I'd like you to imagine on the next few breaths that you have a straw in your mouth and you're blowing out through the straw. Now see if you can blow all of the air out of the lungs. Just do this in your own time. You should be able to feel the transverse abdominal muscles really kicking in then, and when you push to empty the lungs, you'll feel those muscles, and also the intercostal rib muscles, you'll feel them drawing down and working together to help the body exhale. So I'd like you to practice some quite deep breaths now. So maybe do 3 deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the straw, through the mouth, still really keenly feeling the sensations as you do that. So in your own time, 3 breaths. When you've done that, have a rest. So you'll probably feel actually that it's possible to work the muscles very hard, and it's important as you're flooding your body with probably a bit more oxygen than you normally would. It's important to stop, especially when you're learning this practice, and have a few normal breaths in between, so you're not taking in too much oxygen, getting a little bit lightheaded, and losing too much carbon dioxide. All these things have a really physical effect on the body chemistry, and we can really change our body chemistry very much for the better by doing this. So now we've had a little rest. We're going to breathe in again through the nose and out through the mouth, but this time I want you to give yourself a count. Now everyone is different, so I'm not going to give a count. I just want you to think of your own count. So it might be in 1, 2, 3, and then out. It might be more or less numbers than that, but when you breathe out, I want you to breathe out for a longer count than you breathe in. So just experiment for a few moments, breathing in maybe on 3 and pushing out for 5, and really empty the lungs and see how that feels. Just 3. And when you've done that, again, have a little rest period while I talk to you about the next bit. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce a colour. So you'll have a strong image in your head when you breathe in of a particular colour. I'm going to choose blue because it's a nice cool colour, and I think that the room is quite cool, and I can imagine the blue air coming in through my nose, going right deep into my body. I'd like you to imagine the colour you choose going not just to the diaphragm, to the base of the lungs, but actually right down your body to your feet. Imagine the colour, again, also down your arms to your fingertips, Imagine that colour flooding into the body and flooding the whole body, because that's the effect that oxygen has. And then when you breathe out, imagine a warmer colour. So I'm going to imagine a really warm orangey red. So again, do another 3 breaths. Again, with the straw blowing out. So we're going to empty the lungs, but with this beautiful colour. So I'll leave you to do that in your own time for a few moments. So there are many ways to develop this type of breathing, and you might find you're able to continue very deep breaths for longer, and that your count might extend. It can be the beginning of a beautiful meditative practice, and I think I said before, it's incredibly good for reducing stress. It really can address the fight or flight reflex, the adrenal response we have when we get nervous or anxious, and it can actually control and soften and repress that. So it's a really useful thing to learn. Now I'm about to move from my position on the floor to go and play you the Bach, but I'd like you to stay where you are, and you can either begin to deepen that practice yourself, or you might just simply want to listen to the music, let the sound flow over you, think about how the music breathes. And then I'll speak to you for a few moments after that. So stay where you are and really enjoy the feeling of sinking into the floor and connecting mindfully with your breath. thank you for joining me. You had 3 of me then, because I recorded the soundtrack as well, so a bit too much. Ann Lovatt. Anyway, thank you very, very much for joining me. The orchestra does a huge amount of work aside for our concert giving, and I'm sure you know that we go into lots of hospitals and psychiatric units, schools. We reach a lot of vulnerable and sometimes, especially now, isolated people. And we can't do this without your help. So if you've enjoyed the session today and you feel you can donate something, we would be really grateful. You need to go to www.cls.co.uk/donate. So in 2 weeks' time, you have another music and mindfulness session. Please tune in to wonderful Principal Second Violin, Jane Carradine. She's going to be asking the question, what is the purpose of music? I hope you've enjoyed this session, and